Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, everyone. Uh, my name is Sayyid Haider Imam Rizvi. I'm from Pakistan and I'm a lawyer by profession. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers, Markaz-e-Umeed, and its Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Zishan Imdad, and International Youth Conference founder, Mr. Ali Mustafa, for giving me the opportunity to speak at such an important event. And it is a great honor for me to address this young and extremely motivated audience. As being a student of law for the past 20 years and being a significant part of legal fraternity in Pakistan, I have personally experienced the flaws and gaps of justice system not only in my country but all around the world. I would like to talk about the Sustainable Development Goal number 16, which is peace, justice, and strong institutions, because this is a topic which is very close to my heart and my professional experience gives me an edge and in-depth knowledge about the issues revolving around it. Let's start with talking about the concept of justice and why it is important to have a fair and transparent justice system in every society. Justice for many people refers to fairness, but while justice is important to everyone, it means different things to different groups. For instance, social justice is the notion that everyone deserves equal economic, political, and social opportunities, irrespective of race, gender, caste, creed, or religion. Justice quite simply forms the foundation of a civilized society. Societies without just law tends to be harsh and intolerant, often leading to conflict. We hold up we hold up the rule of law and the ideal of justice as being blind to social status, wealth, or anything else. In the Western world, it is said that everyone has the right to a fair trial. We may and may not entirely believe that on a personal level, but we probably all understand that the principle is crucial. In view of the aforesaid discussion for the foremost important issue dealing with the principle of fair trial and justice is rule of law. The rule of law is fundamental to international peace and security and political stability, to achieve economic and social progress and development, and to protect people's fundamental rights. It is foundational to people's access to public services, curbing corruption, restraining the abuse of power, and to establishing the social contract between people and the state. Rule of law and development of country are strongly interlinked, since it is the rule of law through which independent institutions are built up and can play an important role in implementing policies and maintaining peace and harmony at a state. Rule of law ensures that international law and the principles of justice apply equally to all states and are equally adhered to. Respect for the rule of law generates an enabling environment for achieving the purposes of Charter of United Nations. I believe rule of law is the most important element which could help states in maintaining state peace and harmony across the world. This is the reason this United Nations has been given with a job of maintaining international peace under Article 1 of the Charter of United Nations. The first question is, what does rule of law means? What I understand that it means a society where all individuals enjoy certain right, which can only be taken away through a process which is in accordance with prescribed rules, and those rights, that process and rules are consistent and stable and broadly the same for everyone and cannot be worried by anyone just because they are powerful. Where government needs to have a good laws institutions and processes in place to ensure accountability, stability, equality, and access to justice for all. This ultimately leads to respect for human rights and the environment. It also helps to curtail corruption and instances of violent conflict. This concept is called rule of law. It affects everything about where people work and how they live. A strong rule of law includes, firstly, enforceability of fundamental rights in light of Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948. Since the same is the basic charter for protection of human rights, and in the light of Universal Declaration for Human Rights 1948, world countries have given fundamental rights to citizens. Unfortunately, in some of countries, the same are mere part of their legislation, mere part of their constitution. But in practical terms, it has no application, no applicability. Secondly, the states are required an independent, impartial, and strong judiciary, which should be free from any outside pressure and could dispense justice and promote fairness and ensures transparent, timely, and predictable resolution of disputes, as well as could ensure implementation of fundamental rights to the citizens. However, the judiciary should not overreach in the functions and domain of other independent institutions. Access to justice is a fundamental right that must be guaranteed in democratic, participatory, and egalitarian societies. It is the right of all individuals to use the legal tools and mechanisms to protect their other rights. There is no access to justice when, for economic, social, or political reasons, people are discriminated against by law and justice system. In general access to justice guarantees that people can go before the courts for protection of their rights, regardless of their economic, social, political, migratory, racial, or ethnic status, or their religious affiliation, gender identity, or sexual orientation. Access to be real must be brought and free from discrimination. What we witness that in general, especially in third world, this discrimination is very common. So access to justice is being denied to common man. Only powerful people have access to justice. That is a complete discrimination to rule of law. It is the complete discouragement to rule of law. And access to justice and the rule of law enable people to resolve conflicts, claim their rights, and seek and obtain remedies. They help to level the playing field between the vulnerable and the powerful by addressing issues of impunity, corruption, and discrimination. It is important to mention at this stage that the causes of conflict and violence, such as injustice, inequalities, and decline in the quality of democracies, rarely emerge and remain within the national borders of a single country. They increasingly spill over into surrounding regions, compelling a regional response. This is why we should never be under the wrong impression that if there are conflicts and injustices not taking place within our border, thinking that they are far away from our homes and will not affect us as a society, then this could be our mistake, as the same issues might be knocking on our door tomorrow, if not today. The rule of law and development are strongly interrelated and mutually reinforcing. That are the advancement of the rule of law at the national and international levels is essential for sustained and inclusive economic growth, sustainable development, the eradication of poverty and hunger, and the full realization of all human rights and fundamental freedoms, including the rights to development, all of which in turn reinforce the rule of law. At a national level, the rule of law is necessary to create an environment for providing sustainable livelihoods and eradicating poverty. Poverty often stems from disempowerment, exclusion, discrimination. The rule of law fosters development through strengthening the voices of individuals and communities by providing access to justice, ensuring due process, and establishing remedies for violation of right, security of livelihoods, shelter, tenure, and contracts can enable and empower the poor to defend themselves against violation of their rights. Legal empowerment goes beyond the provision of legal remedies and support better economic opportunities. Unfortunately, what we witness is contrary to what I said, because in usually in third world countries, usually in some of the countries, we witness that people are not being given fair opportunities. Fair trial is being not so common in our countries. So in order for the rule of law to further sustainable development outcomes, it must ensure protection for all human rights, including economic, social, and cultural rights and the right to development. While rule of law may provide a legal framework, contractual certainty, and dispute resolution mechanisms that support economic growth and development, it is only the rule of law consistent with international human rights which can provide for development that is also inclusive and sustainable. Human rights have a major aspect for every civilized society. Since time immemorial, the concept of upholding one's basic rights and preventing their unjust deprivation have been a cornerstone in the foundation of nearly every single nation's level. Effects of a failure in implementing rule of law. The rule of law and development of countries are strongly interlinked with independent and strong institutions. Since the rule of law is the foundation of justice, opportunity, and peace and development, if the rule of law is not implemented in letter and spirit, there would be adverse, serious consequences. Violence against human rights defenders is so common. It's so common in the entire world. Investigating, reporting human rights violations, and educating people about human rights and campaigning for justice can be a tough task. Human rights defenders are people who individually or with others promote and protect human rights through peaceful and non-violent means. Because of their work, human rights defenders can be subjected to different types of violence, including beatings, arbitrary arrest or executions, tortures, death threats, harassment, defamation, or restrictions on their freedom of expression and associations. In 2019, the United Nations tracked 357 killings and 30 enforced disappearances of human rights defenders, journalists, and trade unionists in 47 countries. What we have seen that in some of the countries, what we have seen that, especially with regard to trade unionists, we are talking that industrial relations ordinances and the acts are not being promulgated with true spirit to benefit the trade unionists, to benefit the laborers, but it is on the contrary supporting the employers, and that is absolutely against the spirit of the rule of law. Maintaining peace, providing human security and human rights. War and violence inevitably result in a denial of human rights. Building a culture of human rights is a precondition to achieving a state of peace. Sustainable, lasting peace and security can only be attained when all human rights are fulfilled. And for fulfilling the human rights of the strong and independent institutions are the foundation in order to have source and implement the human rights. Strong institutions and just law are essential for protecting people's rights and must be firmly established to ensure everyone can live free of discrimination, violence, and exploitation. Unfortunately, institutions can also be perpetrators of violence and repressions and reinforce inequities. In 2017, 68.5 million people were displaced of violence and conflict, a record number. While tensions around settling migrants in Western countries escalates, 84% of refugees settled in developing countries. Peace and justice can only be achieved when institutions serve in the interest of all people. So let's invest in democratic, transparent, and inclusive processes to ensure everyone can live in peaceful and inclusive society, not exclusive. Role of rule of law in maintaining peace is very important. Rule of law plays vital role in maintaining peace in the world, since it was the prime objective of establishing United Nations to maintain peace in the world, since the same has been duly incorporated under Article 1 of the Charter of United Nations. And we need to see what is peace. A culture of peace will be achieved when citizens of the world understand global problems, have the skills to resolve conflicts and struggle for justice, non-violently live by international standards of human rights and equity, appreciate cultural diversity, and respect the earth and each other. Such learning can only be achieved with systematic education for peace. Importance of peace is history has been proof of thousands of wars which have taken place in all periods at different levels between nations. Thus, we learn that peace played an important role in ending these wars or even preventing some of them. In fact, if you take a look at all religious scriptures and ceremonies, you will realize that all of them teach peace. They mostly educate eliminating war and maintaining harmony. In other words, all of them hold out a sacred commitment to peace. It is after the thousands of destructive wars that humans realized the importance of peace, which could only be possible by respecting rule of law. Earth needs peace in order to survive. This applies to every angle, including wars, pollution, natural disasters, and more. A concept of closely related to peace and violence is human security, which recognizes the interrelation between violence and deprivation of all kinds. It concerns the protection of individuals and communities from both the direct threats to violence, physical violence, and indirect threat that results from poverty and other forms of social, economic, and political inequalities, as well as natural disasters and disease. A country may not be under threat of external attack or internal conflict, but still be insecure if, for example, it lacks the capacity to maintain the rule of law. If large populations are displaced by famine or decimated by disease, or if at peace people lack the basic necessities of survival and access to their human rights. The rule of law and development are strongly interrelated and mutually reinforcing. That the advancement of the rule of law at the national and international level is essential for sustained and inclusive economic growth, sustainable development, the eradication of poverty and hunger, and the full realization of all human rights and fundamental freedoms, including the right of to development, all of which in turn reinforce the rule of law and peace. At the national level, the rule of law is necessary to create an environment for providing sustainable livelihoods and eradicating poverty. Poverty often stems from disempowerment, exclusion, and discrimination. The rule of law fosters development through strengthening the voices of individuals and communities by providing access to justice, ensuring due process, and establishing remedies for the violation of the rights. Securities of livelihood, shelter, tenure, and contracts can enable and empower the poor to defend themselves against violation of their rights. Legal empowerment goes beyond the provisions of legal remedies and support better economic opportunities. Delivery of justice should be impartial and non-discriminatory. The independence of judicial system, together with its impartiality and integrity as an essential prerequisites for upholding the rule of law and ensuring that there is no discrimination in the administration of justice. One of the major obstacles in accessing justice is the cost of legal advice and representation. Legal aid programs are a central component of strategies to enhance access to justice. Since no sector is immune to corruption, it is necessary that state parties acknowledge that particular role and vulnerability of justice sector institutions in regard to corruption and engage in continuous efforts to create independent, ethical, and accountable justice sector institutions. Unless constitutionalism is prevail, constitution is prevail in any country, we can't expect rule of law. We can't expect proper access to justice. Whatever the approach to rule of law, we tend to institutions are necessary for the establishment of the concept. On the formal approach, all the elements by themselves, institutions that requires application and enforceable enforcement by state organs such as the judiciary. Similarly, the substantive approach equally requires the impartial application of laws by independent judiciary. Still, third approach needs the judiciary and other state apparatus to work towards the achievement of the goal set by the law. Specifically, and the legal system generally, all three approaches have their own pros and cons as well. While the formal conception places too much emphasis on the law in the books and pays insufficient attention to the law in action. And a second approach faces the problem of determining how just a particular legal order is that requires a complex subject judgment call. Stephen questions the relationship between the legal system per se and its functional goal. He argues it is possible to constrain government officials or realize predictability through means other than the legal system. Suppose a society has less official discretion than its neighbor, even though the latter has apparently more restrictive laws, which enjoys a greater rule of law under a functional definition. A more explicit approach to the relationship of institution to rule of law is presented by one scholar. He thinks a network of mutually reinforcing institutions is necessary for rule of law. Why have all the formal legal improvements that are 21st century democracy, new constitutions, better laws, improved judiciaries, more accountable security forces, failed in many respects to produce more democratic rule of law, especially for the underprivileged? The role informal institutions play has not been appreciated. Therefore, a network of the combined application of formal and informal ancillary institutions is needed to bring about the desired result. The last and the foremost is judicial integrity. What I think, what I observe in my precise career, and what I observed during the judicial struggle, the independence of judiciary is the foremost, and I think the most important part of any civilized society that they have a developed and independent, strong institution like judiciary. And in this regard, judicial integrity is very much important. Integrity, independence, and impartiality are key prerequisites for establishing an effective and functional judiciary and a judicial system for the peaceful resolution of legal disputes. The establishment of an independent and effective justice system that safeguards human rights, facilitates access to all, and provides transparent and objective recourse is a core value held the world over. The centrality of a strong justice mechanism lies in its essential contribution to fostering economic stability and growth, and to enabling all manner of dispute to be resolved within a structured and orderly framework. These principles apply not only to the member of the judiciary, but other actors in the judicial system, including prosecutors, judicial administrators, lawyers. Ineffective criminal prosecutions characterized by lack of independence or capacity is unable to effectively investigate and prosecute cases, corruptions, thus undermining the overall effectiveness of the state anti-corruption efforts. Thank you very much for the patience hearing, and I'm once again grateful to the organizers for giving me this precious opportunity to address this extremely motivated audience. Thank you once again.